It is underway across North Georgia and Metro Atlanta. Good evening. I'm First Alert meteorologist Cutter Martin. No big changes with our evening forecast update. Temperatures already back in the 30s. Probably some frost on the cars even this evening. Out the door tomorrow morning could be a few high clouds moving through, but dry and a lot of sunshine through the day Sunday. Tomorrow morning, freezing start. Temperatures upper 20s, lower 30s in many areas, but rebounding nicely thanks to that sunshine. Temperatures back in the upper 40s to near 50 by lunchtime. We're going upper 40s, lower 50s into early afternoon. I think mid 50s for high temperatures tomorrow afternoon, and you will notice late in the day, probably more so after sunset, those clouds moving back in. Monday, mostly cloudy start to the day, a little bit milder, though still jacket worthy in the morning, and we'll keep it chillier into the afternoon, but that system passing through with no chance of rain, just slight chances of rain Wednesday into Thursday, and we will be watching next weekend for another chance of showers, a chilly rain back in the forecast.
But first, the Kremlin launching its largest air attack since the war began, and Ukrainian forces returning fire. President Biden saying that Putin, quote, must be stopped. News Nation's Alina Shirazi tracking the details. Alina, what can you tell us about this escalation?
Natasha, good evening to you. Well, the war has been escalating overnight with Ukraine retaliating against Russia with missiles and drones. After a Russian strike, officials are calling the most massive aerial attack since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion.
Ukraine hitting back on the battlefield. According to Russia's Ministry of Emergency Situations, at least 20 people, including 2 children, were killed in a Ukrainian air attack on the city of Belgorod today. And in Ukraine, smoke fills a once bright blue sky. Broken glass and metal litter city streets. Police and fire working to evacuate the injured and work through the rubble Friday after a large-scale Russian missile attack that killed at least 30 people. Russia fired more than 150 missiles and drones in Ukraine on Friday in one of the largest bombardments, disrupting a sense of calm during an otherwise quiet winter on the conflict's front lines. The scale of the attack confirmed what many Ukrainians say they've been fearing: Russia conserving their missile stocks for massive strikes. The Ukrainian president saying on X, this was the Russian scum's largest attack, almost 160 missiles and drones. Our warriors shot down most of them. Usual Russian targets, over 100 destroyed or damaged private houses, 45 multi-story residential buildings, schools, 2 churches, hospitals, and a maternity ward. President Biden weighing in, calling the barrage a brutal attack, adding in a recent statement that it's a stark reminder to the world that after nearly 2 years of this devastating war, Putin's objective remains unchanged. He seeks to obliterate Ukraine and subjugate its people. He must be stopped.
And the White House still urging Congress to step up and act in the new year to approve supplemental funding legislation that would unlock more than $61 billion in security aid for Ukraine. We know that Congress meets on January 8th after the holidays to see if they can, in fact, get a deal done. Natasha?
Okay, Alina Shirazi live for us with that update in Washington. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Hundreds of people came out tonight to honor the Spalding County Sergeant killed in the line of duty. Fox 5's Kim Luffler was at that vigil that honored him, and she has more on how he's being remembered tonight.
Sergeant Mark McIntyre had been with the Spalding County Sheriff's Office since 2015. Dozens came out to pay tribute to him Saturday night, saying he's a light in the community who'll be truly missed. Community members and Brothers in Blue came together Saturday to remember the life of Sergeant Mark McIntyre.
we do stand with them. It wasn't just your loss, but it is our loss also.
Sergeant McIntyre, along with another deputy, responded to a domestic call on Decent Street Friday when he was shot and killed. Community members saying McIntyre was one of the most generous people they knew. His barber sharing memories online Saturday, telling us she doesn't know anyone who would speak poorly of him. Spalding County Sheriff Darrell Dix moved to tears seeing the amount of people who came out to show their support.
They considered him a good guy. They considered him somebody that they could go to and talk to and depend on. It shows what he meant to the people in this community.
McIntyre was an Army veteran, moving up ranks at the sheriff's office to become a supervisor in the patrol division and SWAT team member. Sheriff Dix says his loss is devastating for their department, but he hopes McIntyre's memory lives on for how he lived, not how his life was cut short.
Lives are like books. Mark doesn't need to be defined by one sentence in one chapter in one book. He lived volumes of books.
Now Sheriff Dix says the department is leaning on each other for support and wrapping their arms around McIntyre's fiance, who also works in their office.
She's leaning on her faith, and she is a very strong lady, and I know we're going to do everything we can to support her.
Sheriff Dix says right now they're taking things one day at a time as they grieve this devastating loss. He also says this is the first time a deputy has been shot and killed in the line of duty like this here in Spalding County. In Spalding County, Kim Luffler, Fox 5 News.
All right, thanks so much, Kim.
Dozens of cyclists gathered at the West End today before going on a memorial ride for a cyclist killed earlier this month. They hope they can bring awareness. On any given Saturday, Tom Duncan would have been leading this crowd, but this weekend, a group of dozens of cyclists were here to honor him.
Outgoing Christian man, loved everyone, tried to be helpful to everyone. He was actually doing this ride as a team leader to help others as they learned to ride in a bicycle group.
Mike Duncan said his brother Tom was helping a newer cyclist earlier this month while out cycling with the group when he was struck by a driver near Tyler Perry's studios. He did not survive.
He loved riding on the road. He'd ridden hundreds and thousands of miles. He had also taken up mountain biking. This was his passion.
Tom was the second cyclist killed in a 4-week period in Metro Atlanta. The other, Barry Collier, was struck on Thanksgiving Day riding in Lithonia and died days later. In Collier's case, the driver has yet to be found. In Tom's case, the driver did stop. But those who knew the cyclists believe their deaths are a clear sign there needs to be change.
It's unfortunate that drivers are not always educated about sharing the roads with cyclists.
For Tom, he leaves behind a wife, 2 children, and grandchildren. For friends, family, and fellow cyclists, they hope this memorial ride is a reminder to drivers.
Be aware of where you're riding at. Be alert of what's in front of you. Watch out for the bikers. There is a 3-foot law on the right-hand side of the road for bicyclists. You need to give them way.
Well, there's also a GoFundMe to raise money for Duncan's family. Just go to links mentioned on our website.
I'm Channel Action News meteorologist Ashley Kramlich, and a freezing start to our New Year's Eve, but thankfully warming up quite nicely through the afternoon. We're back up into the mid-50s. The milder air, that will be hanging around as we go into our evening forecast. Bringing in the new year, we're dry, a few clouds around, temperatures running in the 40s New Year's evening. Now, by the beginning of 2024, a pretty active weather pattern heading our way. We're going to be tracking multiple cold fronts rolling in. The first one comes in on Monday, but the biggest change with this is that it's going to be very limited in the moisture. So not expecting any rain with the front on Monday, just a burst of some cold air. Another storm system that will be developing in the Gulf of Mexico by midweek. Right now, this looks to take more of a southerly track, which means for us, rain chances look to be pretty slim, but again, it's going to really reinforce that cold air as we begin the first week of 2024. So that 5-day forecast by weekend, always in view, mostly dry during the week. Our next best chance of rain, that rolls in as we head into next week.
Yeah, killer whale madness. This video shared by Newport Coastal Adventures. Well, it shows a killer whale chasing a dolphin through the water. Pretty impressive
That's
video
a Disney
there.
movie.
Yes, it is. A whale watching group got a front row seat to this amazing view here to witness this on Christmas in Laguna Beach. Expedition crew members say they have been following this pod for several days, and this is a rare sighting in California. You more often see these whales off the coast of Mexico and Central America this time of year. And closer to home, these massive sea creatures were spotted in recent days. The Monterey Bay Whale Watch says migration is underway for these great gray whales. It's the longest migration for any mammal in the planet, a journey between 10,000 to 12,000 miles round trip. Experts say these whales use the waters of the Monterey area as their highway as they make their way down the coast to the safe breeding lagoons of Baja, Mexico.
From the producers of The Masked Singer.
The game is simple.
The Supreme Court facing increasing pressure to weigh in on whether states can remove former President Trump from the 2024 ballot, after Maine became the second state to kick him off based on the 14th Amendment's ban on insurrectionists holding public office.
No Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, but no presidential candidate has ever engaged in insurrection and been disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
In Maine, ballot eligibility questions first go to the Secretary of State, not the courts. Trump has called for Democrat Shenna Bellows to recuse herself in this case because of previous comments about January 6th, where she tweeted, "The Jan 6 insurrection was an unlawful attempt to overthrow the results of a free and fair election." She did not remove herself from the matter, and now the issue heads to the courts as Trump and the state's Republican Party vow to appeal.
Our voting rights enshrined in the Constitution are sacred to us, and to have one particular person remove really the top candidate from the ballot because she dislikes that person just smells of politics.
The question of Trump's ballot eligibility has been debated in multiple states, with only Maine and Colorado taking him off the primary ballot. Even California on Thursday opted to include him. In a statement, the Trump campaign accused Colorado and Maine of election interference, attempted theft of an election, and the disenfranchisement of the American voter. Even some of Trump's rivals have criticized states taking him out of the running instead of leaving it to voters.
It makes him a martyr. You know, he's very good at playing poor me, poor me.
Can you have a Republican Secretary of State disqualify Biden from the ballot because he's let in 8 million people illegally?
The Colorado GOP has already appealed that state's ruling to the United States Supreme Court, asking the justices to take up 3 key questions. Does Section 3 of the 14th Amendment apply to a president? And is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to be enforced by states? And also asking whether the GOP has a First Amendment right to choose its candidates. Trump is also expected to appeal.
They're trying to take the election away from the voters.
And in states like Michigan and Minnesota, where they opted to keep Trump on the ballot for the primary, those judges left the door open to relitigate this issue for the general election. So if the Supreme Court does not step in here, this is a question that could hang over the 2024 election through November. Paula Reed, CNN, Washington.
A laughing stock, totally. We can either forget it or do it and just maybe get rich. This is crazy.
The entertainment world mourning the loss of veteran actor Tom Wilkinson. He died suddenly today in the UK at the age of 75. Wilkinson began his career in Britain in the 1970s, but it was a film from 1997 that changed everything. Here's entertainment guru George Pinocchio with more.
Tom Wilkinson's work in The Full Monty earned him plenty of attention and one of his 6 career BAFTA awards. It also kicked off the start of a new phase in his career. The following year, 1998, he was the villain in Rush Hour. The year after that, he was part of Shakespeare in Love.
Now listen to me, you dregs. Actors, a tenner penny.
Wilkinson would earn his first Oscar nomination for his lead role as a grieving father in 2001's In the Bedroom.
Did you hit him at all? Come on, tell me you hit him. Just so he doesn't do it again.
2 years later, he starred with Scarlett Johansson and Colin Firth in Girl with a Pearl Earring. The next year, with Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. In 2005, he was part of Batman Begins, and he played the priest in The Exorcism of Emily Rose. In 2007, Wilkinson earned his second Oscar nomination for his work with George Clooney in the legal thriller Michael Clayton.
The last place you want to see me is in court. It's a perfect script, and you can't really go wrong.
In 2011, Wilkinson was one of the guests of the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. In 2014, he checked into the Grand Budapest Hotel. That's the same year he played President Lyndon B. Johnson in Selma.
There is no Negro problem. There is no Southern problem. There is only an American problem.
Wilkinson won an Emmy for playing another historical figure, Benjamin Franklin, in the miniseries John Adams. And earlier this year, he returned to the role that catapulted his career in a mini-series of The Full Monty for Disney+.
A dog won Britain's Got Talent. Is that what I'm hearing? A dog.
Wilkinson's career spanned almost 50 years. George Pinocchio, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
So much to look forward to as well in terms of what's coming up for us in 2024. Our Don Riddell taking stock of what's on tap in the 12 months ahead.
There's no point in gazing into a crystal ball with sports. We love it because it's so unpredictable. But we do at least know what's on the calendar in 2024, and it's going to be another action-packed year. Taking centre stage will be the Summer Olympics in Paris, the modern games back in the French capital for the first time in a century, as Paris becomes only the second city after London to host the games 3 times. Amidst heightened tensions in the Middle East, security will inevitably be a concern, but the Olympics should feel like a return to normal after the sterility of Tokyo's delayed COVID Games in 2021. In nearby Germany, UEFA's European Football Championship will serve as a curtain raiser to the Games, with Italy the defending champions, and England and France considered the favourites to win the tournament. And all eyes will again be on Lionel Messi as the world champions Argentina seek to defend their Copa America crown and win their 3rd consecutive major title. As the United States continues to prepare for the FIFA World Cup in 2026, next year it will introduce American fans to a new sport for them, co-hosting cricket's T20 World Cup with the West Indies. Talk of a revitalised Tiger Woods will be a major headline in golf, but the sport's biggest story may once again be outside the ropes as the PGA Tour and the Saudi-backed Live Golf continue to wrestle for the future of the game. The return of new mum Naomi Osaka will bolster the highly competitive tennis scene at a time when women's sport more broadly is really taking off. According to the accounting firm Deloitte, women's sports revenue will cross the $1 billion threshold for the first time. That's a 3-fold increase from just 3 years ago. What happens on the court, the course, the pool, the field or the track, there is no shortage of sport to look forward to in 2024. Don Riddell, CNN.
I'm joined now by Cecilia Zanidi, a technology lawyer and AI entrepreneur. Thank you so much for being here with us. So, if I understand correctly, you feel the Times has a pretty strong case. Why is that?
Yeah, so as far as plaintiffs go, the Times has millions of articles going back to 1851. it's hard to imagine a copyright holder with a deeper library in general, and also with a deeper library of very high quality content. The other interesting thing is that as part of the suit, one of the exhibits that the Times put forward was literally 100 examples of ChatGPT giving back verbatim New York Times articles, and in some cases very deeply reported, researched, creative articles.
Interesting. So they're using all these now. Some of these things that they've brought back, citing the Times, they haven't necessarily been accurate either. There are examples of misinformation that have cropped up as well, right?
Yeah, so that's what's kind of interesting. It's a slight wrinkle on a traditional copyright case. So the Times complaint goes through, okay, you can get these verbatim parroting back of Times articles from ChatGPT. But if you don't do that, you can also get misinformation. So literally one of the examples the Times used was you asked ChatGPT, give me an article from the New York Times about how orange juice causes cancer. And ChatGPT very confidently spat back an article that looked like it was from the Times about that. Obviously that's false, but that was another sort of different allegation in the complaint, was that ChatGPT is misinforming and misrepresenting that the content is Times content.
All right. So OpenAI and Microsoft, they haven't necessarily commented on this litigation, but generally, what is their position? What is their response to these allegations?
In general, I think they're going to be leaning on a legal principle called fair use. So fair use is a concept in copyright law that if you use content in a transformative way, that is not, you can do that without consent, and it may not necessarily be copyright infringement. So that's where it'd be their legal position. Their public position generally is, okay, we're making this technology that's good for the world. The way that models are trained is on billions of pieces of writing. New York Times was maybe one part of that, but what we've created is this whole new thing and is not infringing on the original New York Times copyright. The other thing, interesting wrinkle, if you ask ChatGPT itself about this, it will say, I rely on publicly available content. And so that's where I think that OpenAI and Microsoft would lean.
Yeah, that's interesting. I try to ask ChatGPT about this. So listen, they have reached agreements with other media producers. Why not the New York Times?
Yeah, so the Times says in their complaint that the parties had been negotiating since April of this year. My guess, just as an observer, and I've done a number of deals like this, it comes down to the money, right? So big quote in copyright, I'm a professor in law school, and it's been true in my experience in legal practice. Copyright is not about the money. It's about all of the money. So my guess is there were negotiations and they probably stalled on that. Could also be they stalled on, how are you going to refer to the Times, right? So Google, which is a model everybody knows about, obviously you can find New York Times articles or CNN articles on Google, but then you click and you go off to CNN.com, you go off to NewYorkTimes.com. ChatGPT, people are staying in the window and don't necessarily have any reason to leave the site. And so it could be the money, but also the sort of technology details and user experience details that, the Times would say they care very deeply about their readership and about the journalism. And, it's possible that in this new format, it wasn't quite the way they wanted. These kinds of negotiations can get very tricky. And so it is a little bit surprising that the next step was court, but that's where we are.
That's where we are. So the New York Times, obviously a huge player. What impact or precedent might this case set in the industry, do you think?
Yeah, so, every major technology shift tends to have a lawsuit or a number of lawsuits that go with it, right? So everybody probably remembers Napster. Like, that was the advent of digital music. And Napster actually came before iTunes. Like, you needed Napster and that sort of very cutting edge, at that point, copyright infringing format, for then iTunes to come in and create a scheme where we could all pay 99 cents for a song or pay whatever it is through iTunes. And now we have Spotify and a bunch of other digital music platforms. Here, I think it's sort of similar in the sense that whatever it is that emerges, this litigation will probably set rules. And New York Times has been at the Supreme Court before over copyright. So it's very possible that this goes all the way up and we get very clear rules on the interplay between generative AI and copyright.
Night about.
Hey, I'm Sharon Lawson from Good Day Atlanta. If you're getting a new TV or streaming device this holiday season, I hope you'll consider searching Fox Local and adding it to the home screen of your Roku or your Fire TV, so many different platforms. Every morning, we're streaming Good Day Atlanta live while you're getting ready, no matter what time that is, with a convenient weather dashboard right there for you. I know you have a ton of options, but this one is easy and it's free. Just search Fox Local. Search it today.
Tonight, about 100 people gathered for a prayer vigil outside the Spalding County Sheriff's Office to remember Deputy Sergeant Mark McIntyre. He was shot and killed yesterday morning while responding to a domestic disturbance call and welfare check with another deputy. Channel 2's Larry Sproul is live at the Sheriff's Office, and Larry, many are grieving there tonight.
And Candace, a lot of people say Sergeant McIntyre touched the lives of so many people here in Spalding County, and you can see why. Take a look right behind me. Flowers and candles are right here outside of the Sheriff's Office. And I spoke with the Sheriff tonight. He tells me this is tough. People from all over Spalding County and the surrounding area stood outside the Sheriff's Office Saturday night for a prayer service. Yes, it was cold. But everyone here wanted to make a sacrifice for Sergeant Mark McIntyre. He was shot and killed Friday while responding to a domestic disturbance call and welfare check with another deputy. Flowers and candles covered the entrance of the Sheriff's Office. There were hugs of comfort. Prayers of inspiration filled the air.
We are going to take it one day at a time and do what we can to get through this as an agency and as a family.
Sheriff Darrell Dick says this is a tough time for his department. Sergeant McIntyre meant so much to everyone.
Stuff like he was always encouraging people. It's a devastating loss, not just for our agency, but for this community.
A community that is now heartbroken.
It's like losing a family member. This is somebody that you see, that you are close to, and a lot of times in the line of work that we're in, you spend more time with these folks than you do with your own family, and there are bonds that are built.
April Shipman helped coordinate the service. It was their way to show a fallen hero that they care.
We do stand with them. This is our community, this is their community, but we stand with them.
That's what got me when I walked out the door and saw the people. A broad spectrum of people from all walks of life and all communities, pastors and business people and everything. There were even people that were here that I spoke to that had been in this jail before that knew Mark.
So many people touched by his life. Channel 2's Larry Sproul joins us back live from Spalding County. And Larry, we know this is a tough time for the Sheriff's Office. How is his family doing?
Well, Candace, the sheriff tells me that he spoke with Mark's fiance, and obviously she is on an emotional roller coaster. We found out that she actually works here at the Sheriff's Office. The sheriff tells me they are going to be with her every step of the way. Candace?
Yeah, certainly wrapping their arms around his fiance and the rest of his family for sure. Larry, thank you. Teenager once accused of luring a locksmith to his death has been released from jail. Those charges against him dropped. Channel 2's Courtney Francisco live at the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office. And Courtney, you spoke to the locksmith's widow about the new development.
Yes, and the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office would not tell us why the charges were dropped, but I spoke to a former prosecutor who gave us some insight.
Bye, Daddy! I'm gonna miss you!
Miss you already. You be super good.
Home videos capture his smile, his voice, and his family thought DeKalb County had captured Peter McGrath's killer. Until now.
The killers are still out there, yes ma'am.
This month, the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office dropped the charges against the teenager arrested in February for McGrath's murder. Deputies released him from jail the day after Christmas.
It's very shocking.
Police found her husband dead in June of 2022 in his burnt-out locksmith van. She says a woman lured him to Decatur by saying her keys were locked in her car, and police think robbers shot him and drove around in his van before setting it on fire.
I have a small child that will never know her father, and we struggle with the day-to-day.
The DA's office sent us a statement saying, in part, the investigation into Peter McGrath's murder is still open and pending in our office. As such, we are unable to offer additional details regarding the case at this juncture.
There's no bar from bringing charges back again.
Attorney Chuck Boring was a prosecutor in Fulton and Cobb counties for 20 years.
Could be from exoneration, they found evidence that the defendant didn't do it, or that they couldn't prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. It could be that there are other perpetrators who were involved in the killing, and so they may not have been apprehended yet, and the case was malprised to attempt to build that case and find those other perpetrators before this one person in jail goes to trial. There could have been a development within the investigation where they learned new evidence.
Right now, I'm giving up on the justice side, and I'm going to focus more on legislation.
She's asking lawmakers to protect locksmiths and delivery drivers and pass a bill making it a felony to lure them for nefarious reasons.
I don't want my husband to die in vain, and right now it feels like he died in vain.
Channel 2's Courtney Francisco back live in DeKalb County tonight. And Courtney, we originally talked about that teen that was arrested, but we never shared the name of that teen.
That's right. He was 16 years old at the time of his arrest, so we held back, and now the charges have been dismissed.
Yeah, and hopefully eventually some answers for that family. Court.
After removing former President Donald Trump from the state ballot, authorities say the Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, became the latest target of a fake 911 swatting call. Officials say it happened last night, but thankfully she was not home when the call was made, and responding officers did not find anything suspicious there. Bellows has since suspended her decision to remove Trump as she waits for an appeal from Trump's legal team. Now she's pushing back on the criticism from Republicans who say her decision was politically motivated.
Every elected official swears an oath to the Constitution. I swore an oath to the Maine Constitution and the United States Constitution. And Maine election law requires me to hold a hearing of this sort.
I do believe that the Supreme Court will reject this pernicious theory. I think that the court will see this for what it is, which is a distinctly anti-democratic effort to win this election in the courts rather than polling places.
In Colorado, Trump's name will appear on the primary ballot unless the Supreme Court sides with the state's decision to kick him off.
The Times Square ball drop is a hallmark of New Year's Eve. 1 minute before January 1st, the sparkling ball begins its descent.
It's only here in New York City where you see 1 million people gather to watch a lit ball, come down a flagpole, and as we count down, we embrace and kiss and celebrate.
The ball drop has taken place annually since 1907. It was halted for 2 years during World War II, but crowds still flocked to Times Square. Until 1995, the ball drop was managed by the family company of its first creator, Jacob Starr. Since then, there have been many makeovers of the famous ball, including crystals, rhinestones, and strobe lighting. In 2020, the ball dropped to empty streets as the event was hosted virtually due to COVID-19 measures. It descended above a limited crowd of 15,000 in 2021, with full-scale celebrations making a triumphant return to ring in 2023. Whether this enduring ritual has the audience of few or many, it always marks the end of the old and beginning of the new.
Following a major weather threat as we come on the air and the potential impact on travel as millions hit the roads and skies ahead of New Year's Eve. Much of the West Coast racing to fortify beach communities from potential flooding and massive waves reaching up to 40 feet in some places. Officials are also on alert for more of those rogue waves and potentially life-threatening conditions. Crews building large sand barriers in Ventura County. First responders warning residents to stay away from the beach and warning of powerful riptides. Local residents surveying the devastation left by powerful waves, one seaside hotel inundated by mud and sand. All of this expected to have an impact on airports coming during what has been a record week for holiday travel. Meteorologist Samara Theodore standing by with the forecast. But first, ABC's Will Carr leading us off from Southern California.
Tonight, evacuation warnings in Southern California as massive waves slam the coastline. Officials racing to build a fortress of sand on the beaches in Ventura County. Those beaches closed through New Year's Eve after 3 days of coastal flooding and this rogue wave exploding over the seawall, crashing into several people, including the bicyclist seen in lime green in this video.
Like a Hollywood movie. It just came from nowhere, and everyone was surprised by it.
At least 8 people rushed to the hospital. Good Samaritans racing to save this lifeguard, dragging them away from the dangerous surf.
This is like one of the rooms.
The waves sweeping mud and sand through the inn on the beach, Judy Thomas's hotel.
It was like a tsunami from what you've seen on the news and just came suddenly. The people that were up on the second floor in the first room there, they got wet.
Firefighters urging residents to stay away from the berms and the life-threatening riptides.
Our ultimate message is to keep everybody safe and to please heed our warnings because we have them in place for a reason.
High surf alerts stretching across nearly all of the California coastline. In Northern California, isolated waves up to 40 feet. Storms inundating the state, some areas drenched by more than 3 inches of rain during what TSA says is a record-breaking holiday travel season, screening 2.4 million travelers each day this week.
While there are people out here tonight, authorities here in Ventura County are keeping the beaches closed through tomorrow, although they do tell us that they are cautiously optimistic now that high tide has passed. Whit.
And we can see those sand barriers behind you, Will. Thank you. For more on what that storm is going to do, let's get right to ABC's meteorologist, Samara Theodore. Samara, what can we expect for New Year's Eve?
Whit, the good news is this storm on the West Coast is moving out just in time for the holiday weekend festivities. The high surf alerts are now expiring and the storm is diminishing in intensity. Any holiday weekend plans look good for tonight, but just as the holiday weekend wraps up, another storm moves in Tuesday. This will bring rain to cities like San Francisco and Seattle. In the meantime, much of the country is feeling the chill, even Florida. There are frost advisories and freeze warnings in place for Jacksonville. Overnight lows will bottom out just around freezing for the southeast. If you're planning on ringing in the new year here in Times Square, this is what you need to know. Layer up. Temps may say 40 at midnight, but it'll feel much colder. While the bulk of your time will be dry, there's a chance we could see a light shower. Nonetheless, much of the country will be dry as we ring in the year 2024. Whit?
All right, we will take that, Samara. Thank you.
This footage released by the Israeli military on Saturday shows what it says is its troops hitting Hamas targets in Gaza. Residents in the enclave said Israeli tanks pushed deeper into districts in central and southern Gaza under heavy air and artillery fire. Palestine Red Crescent Society posted videos showing wounded children being rushed into a hospital in Khan Yunis. 1.9 million Gazans have been forced from their homes, according to the UN, or 85% of Gaza's entire population. The October 7th Hamas attack on Israel killed 1,200 people and took 240 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. The latest push from Israeli forces comes after South Africa asked the International Court of Justice on Friday for an urgent order declaring that Israel was in breach of its obligations under the 1948 Genocide Convention. Israel blames Hamas for the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza by using them as human shields and stealing humanitarian aid from them, which Hamas denies. The Israeli military released this footage of a tunnel complex in northern Gaza, which Reuters could not verify. The U.S. has called for Israel to scale down the war in the coming weeks and move to targeted operations against Hamas leaders, although so far it shows no signs of doing so.
Alina, I want to check in with you on some breaking news I know coming in this evening. A U.S. destroyer shooting down 2 missiles in the southern Red Sea. What do we know about this at this hour?
Yes, Natasha, we're just learning. The Pentagon telling our Kelly Meyer that the USS Gravely shot down 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles while responding to a Houthi attack on a merchant vessel. They say a Maersk ship was running under Singapore's flag, reported being struck by a missile in the southern Red Sea and called for help. The USS Gravely and USS Laboon responded to that. The cargo ship is said to still be seaworthy, and we know that there are no reported injuries, but we have been reporting on a lot of those attacks in the Red Sea as of late, Natasha.
Certainly. All right, Alina Shirazi live in Washington. Thank you. With illegal border crossings still surging, states on the southern border are taking this fight into their own hands. Next year, a new law in Texas will allow local and state police to have a new power to arrest individuals suspected of being in the U.S. illegally. The legislation also empowers state judges to then deport the undocumented immigrants. The new law effectively gives Texas authorities federal authority when it comes to immigration. The legislation is not sitting well with the U.S. Department of Justice, who this week wrote a letter to Texas Governor Greg Abbott warning that it will sue over this law. The DOJ claiming that the measure violates the Constitution, setting up a significant legal showdown over federal immigration enforcement. For more insight into this and the latest on our southern border, we're bringing in former U.S. Border Patrol Chief Ron Vitello. He also served as the acting director of ICE under the Trump administration and is currently a candidate for U.S. Senate in Virginia. Ron, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me, Natasha. Good to see you.
Let's start with this new law in Texas set to take effect in March, I believe. What do you make of this? Do you agree with it?
Well, it is something that's going to go forward in the courts. It remains to be seen how DOJ and the courts will treat it. It's a measure of desperation, right? Texas, for many, many years, has been investing in the problem of uncontrolled migration across the southwest border, and it's been very acute over the last 3 years. They've deployed the National Guard. They have hundreds and probably thousands of Department of Public Safety employees deployed, the Fish and Game. They have people on the river. They have people in the brush, helicopters, etc. So the Texas legislature has appropriated millions of dollars for this problem. They've changed laws over the years, and this is another iteration because the federal government is just not meeting its responsibility to protect that border and to protect the rest of us.
I think there's been some criticism of this new law, not in the specific circumstance of law enforcement, state or local, actually physically seeing that illegal border crossing taking place at the Rio Grande, at the wall, but in a situation of individuals just living life in Texas, driving, just being in a grocery store. What do you think meets the bar of being suspicious of being in the country illegally? And what would you say to those who worry that this will simply result in racism?
Well, those are professional law enforcement officers as it relates to the Department of Public Safety. I'm sure they will publish strict rules about how they engage and what they can see or what they don't see. And then it's a matter of law as it relates to whether they, witness somebody crossing the border illegally. Stops on the near or away from the river are occurring every single day, right? They can recognize when vehicles are overloaded, filled with people who are being smuggled up from the border. And so they have a lot of training and a lot of activity and operations that they're already conducting. This is another layer of complexity, to be sure, but they are very capable, as a very capable workforce.
So you are not in favor of local or state law enforcement making stops just on the basis of someone not looking like they are from this country or speaking another language?
No, that's already against the law, right? There are rules and laws and policies against racial profiling. So professional law enforcement officers already operate in that conduct, and they conduct themselves in accordance with our Fourth Amendment. And so I don't have any concerns that will be a problem. It will be hyped and it will be talked about, and all plans are subject to failure and implementation. Mm-hmm. But this is something that Texas is desperate. And this is an opportunity for them to do a little bit more than they're already doing, and they're doing quite a bit.
Short of actually seeing someone crossing the border illegally, what do you think it does look like for someone to be in this country illegally? How would one tell?
Well, it just takes years and years of experience, but law enforcement officers know when a vehicle is overloaded as it's running down the road, how it handles, how it looks, the profile of the vehicle itself, the dark windows, the erratic behavior by drivers coming from certain parts of the border, certain neighborhoods, certain times of day. Law enforcement officers who do that for a living do it very, very well and do it professionally. And so I don't suspect it would be any different for the Department of Public Safety or the state and locals in the border area. You got to remember that half of our U.S. border is in Texas. And so, the law enforcement agencies that work along that line, they know full well how to patrol and operate and protect their citizens. This is, again, another layer of authority and another tool that they can use to protect their communities.
Yeah, it's a difficult topic, and we appreciate you addressing it with us tonight. Ron Vitello, thank you as always.
War.
Who is the celebrity behind the
War between Israel and Hamas. Thousands of protesters demanding Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu step down over his handling of the war, with hostages still in captivity. Tonight, new images from our team on the ground in southern Gaza. Gunfire and explosions can be heard nearby. ABC's Britt Clennett reporting from Tel Aviv.
Tonight, outrage in Tel Aviv. Thousands of Israelis rallying against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the war against Hamas. Up in arms that more than 100 hostages are still held in Gaza.
Growing louder for Netanyahu to step down. The message here tonight is dismiss him now.
Civilians.
Arthur Shemesh has 3 close friends still captive.
I want them to put this topic first priority. More than anything, more than military targets, more than any other political aspirations.
Former U.S. peace negotiator Dennis Ross attending the protest in solidarity with the hostages.
There needs to be more pressure put on Hamas. The illegitimacy of their actions needs to be much more prominent.
The IDF says it discovered tunnels of Hamas's general headquarters in northern Gaza and a hideout apartment belonging to General Yahya Sinwar. In the video they released, the IDF prepares explosives and destroys the structure. Netanyahu today saying the war will continue for many more months. Tonight, the fierce fighting in southern Gaza intensifying as Israeli troops expand their ground offensive. And the UN reports a surge in people fleeing further south to Rafah. Our producer on the ground in Han Yunis, explosions and gunfire in the distance.
Weather threat on one of the busiest travel days of the year, the final weekend before New Year's, and the urgent coastal warning. Massive waves crashing into the California shoreline, and this rogue wave and Ventura County, north of Los Angeles, injuring at least 8 people when they were swept off their feet. The wave carrying some about 50 yards. Water rushing through the doors of a restaurant in Santa Cruz County. The system moving its way down the coast through tomorrow. Rob Marciano standing by. But first, ABC's Will Carr leads us off from Southern California.
Tonight, high surf warnings across Southern California, 25-foot waves possible in the hours ahead. Crews racing to build sand berms to protect the shoreline. This after that massive rogue wave took over Ventura streets like a tsunami. A wall of water sweeping up people and vehicles in its path. At least 8 people were hurt. More than a dozen rescues Thursday watch as 2 people race to help this lifeguard, grabbing their arms, pulling them to dry land.
So this was the lobby.
That wave destroying the first floor of Judy Thomas's inn.
A wave
Right. A
of
wave.
that strength.
Yes.
Could you ever imagine?
No. I mean, it was like a tsunami.
The powerful system slamming the whole West Coast, damaging businesses in Northern California's Santa Cruz County.
With the waves being so powerful, if you turn your back for even a split second, you can be knocked over, swept away.
And there is still a serious threat heading into the weekend. That's why authorities have built up those berms behind me to protect the homes and businesses across this area as that high surf warning is in effect until late Saturday night.
Will Carr, thank you. Let's get right to ABC's senior meteorologist, Rob Marciano. So, Rob, what can we expect for the holiday weekend?
Well, things will eventually calm down, but we got to get through this West Coast storm first. And it's really 2 storms that are churning up the Pacific and causing all this wave action. The first one is really spinning a front, and that's what's bringing the rain to Portland and San Francisco, soon to Santa Barbara, eventually to Los Angeles tomorrow morning. More coastal flooding, more waves, 1 to 2 inches of rainfall, maybe up to a foot or more of snow. Good news, this does eventually die in the mountains. So as we look ahead to New Year's Eve, pretty quiet across much of the country with the exception of some leftover rain and snow showers across the Great Lakes and parts of the Northeast. Whit?
Some welcome news. We'll take it, Rob. Thanks so much.
We're going to start this half hour here with a closer look at the top political headlines this week. And joining us, our ABC News political director, Rick Klein. And for the first time here on GMA Saturday, contributing political correspondent, Rachel Bade. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Welcome.
Absolutely. All right, Rick, let's go ahead and start with you. And let's talk about Donald Trump. Maine and Colorado both removing him from the primary ballots. And then you're talking about other states perhaps trying to do the same. But then you have some Republican-led states that are trying to remove President Biden from the ballot. What's going on here? It seems like a mess.
Yeah, it's chaos. I mean, we're only 2 weeks away from the voting starting, and we don't know for sure who's going to be on the ballot, who's not going to be on the ballot. As a legal matter, the Supreme Court has to take this up pretty quickly to settle it and give some kind of a nationwide standard, some guidance to states. But as a political matter, it is not cutting the way you might think. You might think that the other Republican candidates would love not to have to face Donald Trump. Actually, all of Trump's opponents, including Chris Christie, who's very critical of Trump, think this is a bad decision. They think this should be left to voters. And in fact, this is just feeding Trump's argument. It actually couldn't work better for him in some ways politically because it feeds the idea that this is somehow rigged. And the other Republican candidates, either willingly or not willingly, are kind of playing into that narrative as we go into January.
And speaking of some of those other Republican candidates, Rachel, let's bring you in here because Nikki Haley, she had this momentum coming into Christmas. And then she's asked a seemingly simple question about the cause of the Civil War, leaves out the word slavery, facing this backlash now. She's tried to clarify, but what could this do to her campaign down the stretch?
Yeah, talk about shooting yourself in the foot at the wrong time. This gaffe couldn't have come at a worse time for Nikki Haley. She's had this momentum, as you mentioned, in her campaign, overtaking Ron DeSantis in the early states, seeing her polling going up. This could really stall that and, make voters, alienate voters who are looking for a Republican to vote for who is not named Donald Trump. It also very much feeds into this criticism that people who don't like her have about her, that she is wishy-washy on things like abortion and her position on Donald Trump, that she doesn't answer questions directly, and that she's just trying to be all things to all people. And that's why you see people like Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis really seizing on this blunder to try to halt her momentum at this critical time right before voters head to the polls.
So many of the candidates trying to seize on that moment. Rick, with the voting in Iowa, in the Iowa caucuses starting January 15th, what's the predicted game plan for those trying to stop Trump?
Yeah, it's not easy. And none of these candidates have a direct opportunity or a lane where they say, I can beat him if only this happens. But it does start in the early states. Ron DeSantis is all in on Iowa. He's got the support of prominent evangelical leaders and also the governor there. If he's able to finish at least a strong second in Iowa, he can make the case that he's the one to face down Trump. New Hampshire is just 8 days later. There's an ABC debate right in between, guys, and it's a big opportunity for Nikki Haley and Chris Christie. A lot of pressure on Chris Christie, maybe even drop out before that. He says he's not going to do it, but the two of them are kind of battling it out to have that one person standing against Trump once again. But even if one of those things happens, there's no guarantees here. Donald Trump is up so big in polling. He could easily have this nomination wrapped up by March if things stay the way they are right now. Of course, we always know to expect the unexpected.
And I know that you're going to keep looking at all of those numbers. Rachel, let's go back to you, because what are the surprises that you're looking for in 2024?
So hard to predict in politics these days. Two things. First of all, I'm watching which candidates drop out and where especially their voters go. The Nikki Haley folks, her allies, have this theory that if Ron DeSantis does poorly in Iowa, he'll drop out. His voters will actually go to her and give her this momentum before New Hampshire. Rick mentioned Chris Christie is also under this pressure to drop out. It's not an unfair bet that if he does, that his voters would swing to Nikki Haley, who has similar politics. Can the fall of both of these men sort of be the thing that boosts her to be a real threat to Donald Trump? And of course, on the other hand here, we also have to keep an eye on Donald Trump's legal issues, right? If he is convicted in any of these sort of criminal trials across the country, that would totally upend the political world as we know it and scramble 2024 and make all of this entirely unpredictable again.
We do know in Iowa, anything can really happen.
Yep.
Right.
So it'll be in just a few weeks left before we get to it. So it should be interesting. Thank you both. We really appreciate it.
That's right. Rachel Babe, Rick Klein, thank you so much.
Miller Lite in Atlanta to hold me down tonight. Trust me.
Good traveled here from Charleston to support the Rebs and says he never doubted them for a second.
Rebs by $1 million from the start, from the kickoff. Their D was a little good, but we had it the whole time. And we figured it out and beat the brakes off the Big Ten, baby. Let's go.
But it was a different story, of course, for Penn State fans like Chris Talley.
From Philadelphia, and I'm upset. I traveled all these miles. I thought my team was going to come through.
Talley didn't hold back when we asked him what went wrong.
It's your fault, Franklin. It's Nick Sirianni's fault, and it's James Franklin's fault. And I came all the way down here for nothing. But it's all right. I love Atlanta, though.
Mike Ortega is a Penn State alum, but his daughter Caitlin goes to Ole Miss.
It was better for some of us than others. Let's just say that.
I had a lot of fun doing all the cheers, that's for sure.
The family lives in Peachtree City, and being family, there were no hard feelings between them after the game.
She's going to have to get an Uber home.
So you figure out a way home.
You worry about her, and we'll be all right.
Check us out. Soul food, seafood, burgers, food bar.
Now all these fans needed was a place to either celebrate or drown their sorrows, making this year's Peach Bowl a win for Atlanta's bars and restaurants as well.
Come on, I know you're hungry today. Let's all enjoy.
Well, according to an analysis done by a Georgia State University professor, last year's Peach Bowl generated around $90 million in economic impact, and this year's is expected to do the same, if not more. Reporting outside Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Eric Mock, Fox 5 News.